What can we expect when this cluster's brought under control? Will life return to a relative new normal? Well, according to one expert, Delta's changed the landscape so much the relative freedoms of the past 18 months may be a thing of the past. There are now 107 community cases of the highly infectious strain, 99 of those in Auckland and 8 of them in the capital. Well, joining me now is one of the government's advisors and COVID modeller, Rodney Jones. Good evening, Rodney. The Prime Minister has said we haven't seen the peak yet. What do you think the peak will look like?
See, you can't say that. There's hope from some modellers that we see it in the next 2 to 3 days. I think the next two to 3 days are really big days in terms of what do we see, really pivotal days ahead of us. The risk is it runs on longer, and that would be my concern.
So when you say the next couple of days are pivotal, can you explain to people why that is?
Yeah, so let's say we find out tomorrow the cases are 15, for instance. Then we can start to sigh a kind of some, breath relief. That would be good news. If it climbs again, that means we're still on that exponential path. So that in these outbreaks, every day matters, and it kind of guides you to what sort of path you're on. And the next 2 days particularly are very important.
So we know that a huge number of people travelled, right? There was a 48-hour window of opportunity for people to get back to where they normally reside. So how do we factor those people, or you factor those people into modelling when we look at the fact that, at the moment we've got cases in Wellington and Auckland and no further, but we know people travelled extensively and have gone to the South Island and they are contacts?
Yeah, so that's why we have level 4. So even if someone has travelled and say a student has gone home or someone's travelled, that they will be sitting at home. So that's not such a big concern. The concern is more the outbreak in the communities in Auckland. To what extent is it affecting essential workers? And the lists say it is, who have to stay mobile for our society to function. So that's the much bigger risk here. People who have travelled to different places or are at level 4 till Friday, those cases will appear. What really matters is Auckland and to a lesser extent Wellington.
So just talking to the Minister there about what happens on Friday, particularly with the rest of the country outside Auckland, do you think in terms of what you see with modelling, it would be realistic to go from a level 4 straight to a level 2, or would we really need to pass through level 3 on the way?
Oh, you'd probably want a level 3. It's the weekend. We can then reassess at the start of next week. But again, I think, this battle, if you like, is going to be fought out in Auckland, as it has been previously.
Yeah, so in terms of life with Delta, how is it different, or how will it be different for us in terms of whether we can return to level 1 or whether we're perpetually stuck in a scenario that looks a bit like level 2? How has Delta changed the game here?
Well, it's changed the game completely. And in hindsight, once we have cases in the country, I think that's more important than digging into the specifics of how it actually happened, is accepting there will be breaks. Once you see cases in MIQ rising, you're at risk. That was the case the year ago, last July, ahead of August, and it was the case leading into this outbreak. So we may have to consider, until we're vaccinated, staying at a level 2, for instance. That now the race is to get vaccinated, get to the end of the year, but before we can do that, we have to get through this outbreak.
So if we are reliant on vaccination rates to get out of level 2, what would be the appropriate vaccination rate to drop to level 2? How much coverage would you need?
Well, where you run into it, if you vaccinate everybody over 12, you still only get to about 78% of the country. So the next step is going to be, do we vaccinate those up down to the age of 5 if their parents are happy them taking it? We're going to need more than 80% across the whole country, because what we've seen is, Israel at the moment at 60%. They've just been going through a big outbreak with hospitalizations up a lot. The UK's at 73%, and they're still having death rates that we couldn't live with in New Zealand. So we're going to have to look at ways for getting it as high as physically possible.
And could we achieve 80% coverage as a percentage of the entire population without going down to 5 years old?
Probably not. We'll probably get stuck in the high 70s or the mid 70s right now, because there are people who are going to refuse to take it or won't take it. That's our next battle, is how do we get the vaccination rates super high that you need for this virus.
So just returning to my initial question to you about what a peak looks like, right, what the peak looks like. The Prime Minister said today that there's a reproduction rate of about 6 to 1. So is there any way to know round about how many cases we're staring down the barrel of here?
Yeah, so I actually don't agree with the argument that the reproduction rate is so high. I think it's probably the same as it was. The difference is that this virus transmits in a shorter time. So previously it was 7 days, now it's 4 days. So that's how you get such a high number. It looks like 6, but it could actually be the same. It's just got a faster generation time.
And what would that number be, Rodney, if it was the same? What have we been experiencing?
Yeah, so you create a similar path. You kind of don't want, we are in level 4. So the previous path took us like New South Wales. Without a lockdown, we would have been hitting to, that number like 1,000 cases a day. We're not going to do that because we're already in a lockdown. And so the question is, where does the curve bend? And the hardest thing in this whole pandemic is identifying when curves bend. We just don't know, and there's no way of really doing it. It's kind of a little bit of guesswork.
Really good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. That is Rodney Jones, who is a COVID-19 modeller.